The true horror of the lands between began not with the shattering, but with the eradication of the crucible and the imposition of the golden order, fundamentally altering the natural state of life and death. Long before demigods warred over fragments of a broken ring, before the Erd tree's golden light became synonymous with grace and divinity, there existed a primordial state of being where life was raw, chaotic, and endlessly mutable, where creatures bore wings and horns and tails in glorious amalgamation, where death was not an ending, but a return to the great melting pot of existence. This was the age of the crucible, the blending of all life, and it was not a paradise by any measure we might recognize, but it was honest, it was true, and it was the natural order of the world before order itself became a weapon. When the greater will turned its gaze upon this realm, and the Erd tree took root, when Marika the Eternal ascended to godhood and established her golden order, the horror did not announce itself with screams or bloodshed, but with the quiet, insidious rewriting of reality itself. The crucible, once revered, became heresy. The omen, those born bearing the crucible's gifts of horn and scale, were shackled in sewers beneath the capital, their very existence deemed a stain upon the new perfection. Death, that most fundamental transition, was stripped from the world and locked away within a single being, Malekith the Black Blade, transforming the natural cycle into an artificial eternity where souls could no longer pass on, but were instead absorbed into the Erd tree's roots, fed back into a system that sustained the Golden Order's grip on existence. This was not salvation, but subjugation, not enlightenment, but enslavement, and every horror that would follow, every twisted abomination, every cursed ritual, every act of unspeakable desecration, can be traced back to this original sin, this moment when the world was forced into an unnatural shape and held there by divine mandate. The demigods themselves, Marika's offspring, were born into this corrupted system, their very beings shaped by the tensions between what life wanted to be and what the Golden Order demanded it become. And when the Elden Ring shattered, when the carefully maintained illusion of golden perfection finally cracked, what spilled forth was not chaos, but the inevitable consequence of centuries of repression, mutation, and forbidden knowledge. You have walked through Kyled and seen the scarlet rot consume everything, turning soldiers into shambling fungi, and the land itself into a festering wound that will never heal. But this was not random catastrophe. It was millennia, a demigod born cursed by an outer god, wielding her affliction as a weapon in a war that had already lost all meaning. You have descended into the blood-soaked halls of Mogwyn Palace and witnessed the grotesque rituals performed in service to the formless mother, where Mog, the Lord of Blood, seeks to elevate his half-brother Miquella to godhood through an act of profound violation, creating a new dynasty built on the desecration of the most innocent among the demigods. You have encountered the three fingers in the depths beneath Landel, and felt the maddening pull of the frenzied flame, an outer god that does not seek to rule or reshape the world, but to burn it all away, to return everything to the primordial chaos that predates even the crucible, to end the suffering of existence by ending existence itself, and the merchants who carry this flame do so not out of malice, but out of unbearable grief, their entire people buried alive and burned in the sewers of the capital for the crime of being different, for threatening the Golden Order's monopoly on truth. You have read the messages left by the Dung Eater, that most reviled of beings, who does not kill for pleasure or power, but to curse his victims so thoroughly that their souls can never return to the Erd tree, so that their offspring will be born omen, perpetuating the cycle of suffering and ensuring that the Golden Order's perfect system is poisoned from within, generation after generation, a revenge so absolute that it extends beyond death into the very fabric of reincarnation itself. These are not random horrors scattered across a fantasy landscape for atmosphere or shock value. They are the systematic consequences of a world that was broken at its foundation, where the natural order was replaced with an artificial one, where death was removed from the cycle, where the crucible's chaotic vitality was deemed monstrous and suppressed, where outer gods vie for influence over a realm that has already been hollowed out from within. The Night of Black Knives, when Rani orchestrated the theft of the Rune of Death and the assassination of Godwyn the Golden, was not the beginning of the end, but merely the moment when the rod at the heart of the Golden Order became impossible to ignore, when Marika herself, the God Queen who had imposed this system, apparently sought to destroy it, shattering the Elden Ring in an act that was either desperate rebellion or the final stage of some incomprehensible divine plan. What followed was the shattering, a war among demigods for fragments of the broken ring, each piece granting power but also deepening the corruption, turning Marika's children into twisted reflections of their former selves. Godric grafting the limbs of the dead onto his own body in a grotesque parody of the crucible's blending. Rykard feeding himself to a god-devouring serpent to gain the power to challenge the very gods. Radon holding back the stars themselves, even as the scarlet rot ate away at his mind and body, reducing the mightiest warrior in the realm to a mindless beast feeding on the corpses of friend and foe alike. The lands between became a realm of stagnation, where nothing could truly die, but nothing could truly live either, where the Erd tree's golden light still shone but offered no grace, where the dead walked and the living envied them, where every corner held some new abomination born from the fundamental wrongness that had infected reality itself. And then you arrived, tarnished, called back from beyond the lands between, by a grace that had been stripped from you long ago, guided by a maiden who may or may not be leading you toward salvation, or simply another form of enslavement, tasked with collecting the great runes and becoming Elden Lord, with mending the ring and restoring order, but order of what kind, and for whose benefit, and at what cost? The game presents you with choices, paths to different futures. You can restore the Golden before the Golden Order, before Queen Marika's ascension, before the shattering and the wars that would scar the lands between. There existed something far older and far stranger. In the ancient era, at the very dawn of existence in this world, all life emerged from a single source, a phenomenon known as the primordial crucible. This was not merely a beginning, but the beginning, the point from which every living thing would eventually spring forth. The primordial crucible was a swirling, chaotic amalgamation of all life, a singular force that contained within it every possible form, every potential shape, every conceivable expression of vitality. Imagine, if you can, a churning sea of pure biological energy, where the boundaries between species, between forms, between what we might call animal and plant, and something altogether different, simply did not exist. This was not life as we understand it today, organized into neat categories and hierarchies. This was life in its most primal, most undifferentiated state. The crucible predated the Erd tree, predated the Golden Order, predated every system of belief and governance that would later attempt to impose structure upon the lands between. From this roiling mass of primordial energy came creatures unlike anything that would follow. The beings that emerged directly from the crucible possessed diverse and often monstrous forms, physical characteristics that defied easy categorization. Horns sprouted from unexpected places. Wings grew from bodies that seemed ill suited to flight. Tails whipped and coiled, scales mixed with fur, with feathers, with chitinous plates. These were not mutations in the sense of aberrations from a norm, because there was no norm yet. These were simply the expressions of the crucible's infinite potential, each creature a unique manifestation of that raw, untamed life force. These crucible creatures embodied aspects of existence that later ages would struggle to comprehend or accept. They represented life without refinement, without the careful pruning and selection that civilization demands. In their forms, you could see the fundamental truth that the crucible contained everything, the beautiful and the terrible, the graceful and the grotesque, all swirled together without judgment or hierarchy. To the golden order that would eventually rise to dominance, these characteristics would be seen as impure, as signs of a lesser, more savage time. The horns and wings and tails that marked crucible touched beings would become sources of shame, things to be hidden or excised. But in this ancient era, they were simply the way of things, the natural expression of life's boundless creativity. As ages passed within this primordial time, something began to change. The great tree, which would in later epics become known as the Erd tree, began its growth. This was not a sudden appearance, but a gradual emergence, a focusing of the crucible's diffuse energy into a single, towering form. The great tree represented a new phase in the lands between's development, a transition from the chaotic abundance of the crucible towards something more structured, more directed. Yet it did not reject the crucible. Instead, it drew power directly from that primordial source. The great tree's roots delved deep, deeper than any ordinary plant's roots could reach. They pushed down into the very heart of the crucible, into that swirling mass of undifferentiated life, and they drank. The tree absorbed the crucible's life energy, channeling that raw power upward, transforming it as it rose through trunk and branch and leaf. This was a parasitic relationship, perhaps, or perhaps a symbiotic one. The crucible provided the fuel, the endless vitality that allowed the great tree to grow to impossible heights. And the great tree, in turn, gave that chaotic energy a direction, a purpose, a physical form that reached toward the heavens. As the great tree ascended, it began to attract followers, beings who recognized in this towering growth something worthy of reverence, something worth protecting. Among the first and most formidable of these followers were the Crucible Knights, ancient warriors whose very existence bridged the gap between the old world of the Crucible and the new world taking shape around the great tree. These knights were not ordinary soldiers. They were champions in the truest sense, individuals who had been touched by the Crucible's power and had survived, even thrived, bearing its marks upon their bodies and channeling its strength in battle. The Crucible Knights served the nascent Erd tree with absolute loyalty, but their service was to something more primal than the refined divinity that would later characterize the Golden Order. They served the great tree as it was in those early days, when it still pulsed with the raw, unfiltered energy of the crucible, when its power was wild and fierce rather than ordered and golden. These warriors embodied the strength and ferocity of the crucible itself. In combat, they were devastating, capable of channeling aspects of that primordial life force into techniques that seemed to blur the line between human skill and bestial fury. Their armor told the story of their origins and their allegiance. The plate and mail they wore featured bestial motifs that were not mere decoration, but reflections of the power they carried within. Some bore designs of tails, long and powerful, capable of sweeping enemies aside. Others displayed wings, great pinions that spoke of the crucible's gift of flight, of transcending earthly limitations. Horns adorned helmets and pauldrons, not as intimidation tactics, but as honest representations of the physical changes that crucible energy could induce. To look upon a crucible knight was to see the ancient era made manifest, to witness a being who carried the old world's power into the new. These knights were loyal to the great tree and to the early divine manifestations that surrounded it. The proto-gods and primordial forces that existed before Marika would establish her golden order and impose her vision upon the lands between. Their loyalty was not to a system of laws or a carefully constructed theology. It was something more fundamental, a recognition of power and a willingness to serve the source of life itself. They asked no questions about purity or propriety. They simply fought, and in fighting, they proved the crucible's might. The power of the crucible during this era was universally seen as a blessing, a gift from the very source of existence. To be touched by the crucible, to bear its marks upon your body, was to be chosen, to be granted strength and capabilities beyond those of ordinary beings. The unique physical characteristics that manifested in crucible-touched individuals were badges of honor, signs that you had been deemed worthy to carry a fragment of that primordial power. A warrior who sprouted horns was not shunned, but celebrated, for those horns represented a connection to the fundamental force that had birthed all life. A child born with vestigial wings was not hidden away, but recognized as special, as carrying within them the crucible's infinite potential. This acceptance, this celebration of the crucible's diverse expressions, created a culture vastly different from what would follow. There was no concept yet of a pure form, no ideal to which all beings should aspire. Diversity was not just tolerated, but expected, even revered. The more varied the forms life took, the more complete the expression of the crucible's nature. Omen, a term that would later become a curse, a label for those bearing the crucible's horns and deemed impure by the Golden Order, did not exist in this ancient era. There were simply beings, each unique, each carrying their own aspect of the primordial truth. Early forms of faith and worship during this time centered around the great tree and the raw, untamed life force of the crucible that fed it. This was not the organized religion that the Golden Order would later establish, with its hierarchies of priests and its carefully codified doctrines. This was something more immediate, more visceral. People worshipped by acknowledging the power that surrounded them, by accepting the gifts the crucible bestowed, by serving the great tree that rose as a monument to life's persistence and growth. Rituals, if they existed, were likely simple affairs, offerings of gratitude to the source of all things, celebrations of the diversity and strength that the crucible granted. The faithful of this era understood something that would later be forgotten or deliberately suppressed. They understood that life was not meant to be uniform, that strength came from variety, that the crucible's greatest gift was its refusal to limit possibility. A being with the strength of a beast and the intellect of a human was not an abomination, but a wonder, a perfect example of the crucible's ability to combine aspects in new and powerful ways. The great tree itself stood as proof of this principle, drawing from the chaotic crucible below and reaching in ordered majesty above, combining both aspects into something greater than either alone. This ancient era laid the foundational elements for everything that would follow in the lands between. The geography itself was shaped by the crucible's influence, by the way life spread and adapted and claimed every available space. The deep places, the caverns, and underground rivers, the hidden grottos where strange creatures still lurked in later ages, all of these were remnants of the crucible's reach. The great tree's roots created pathways and chambers deep beneath the surface, spaces that would persist long after the world above had changed beyond recognition. Mountains rose where the earth buckled under the pressure of so much concentrated life energy. Valleys formed where the crucible's power flowed like water, carving channels through stone. The creatures that would populate the lands between in later eras, even those that seemed to have no connection to the crucible, carried its legacy in their blood. Every dragon, every giant, every human and demi-human and beast all traced their ultimate lineage back to that primordial source. Some retained more obvious signs of their crucible heritage. Others had evolved or been changed by later influences, but the foundation remained. This was the crucible's true power, not just the ability to create life, but the ability to create the potential for all future life, to establish the basic template that every subsequent being would elaborate upon. The Crucible Knights, in their service to the Great Tree, were preserving not just a ruler or a god, but an entire way of understanding existence. They fought not for territory or treasure, but for the principle that the Crucible represented, the idea that life in all its wild diversity deserved to flourish. When they trained, they did not merely practice sword techniques or tactical maneuvers. They learned to channel the Crucible's aspects through their bodies, to manifest tails that could strike with bone-crushing force, to sprout wings that could carry them above the battlefield, to grow horns that could gore through the heaviest armor. These were not tricks or illusions, but genuine physical transformations, temporary perhaps, but real, drawing on the same power that had shaped all life in the beginning. Before the Golden Order would impose its vision of purity and perfection, before Marika would establish her rule and her laws, before the Elden Ring would be shattered and the lands between would descend into war, there was this. There was the Crucible, churning with possibility. There was the great tree rising toward the sky. There were the Crucible Knights, standing guard over the world still young, still wild, still true to its primordial nature. This ancient era, this time of the Crucible's dominance, set the stage for everything to come, establishing the fundamental forces and conflicts that would define the lands between for ages uncounted. From the wild primordial chaos of the Crucible's age, we now move forward into what scholars call the pre-Erd Tree dynasty, the era of the Golden Order's establishment. This is the epoch when Marika the Eternal ascends to godhood and fundamentally reshapes the very fabric of existence in the lands between. The transformation begins with Marika herself, a figure whose origins remain shrouded in mystery and deliberate historical erasure. What we do know is that Marika, through means that remain unclear, whether through pact with the greater will or through some other cosmic alignment, achieves divinity and becomes the vessel for the Elden Ring itself. This artifact, this cosmic law made manifest, becomes the foundation upon which she builds her new world order. The Elden Ring is not merely a symbol of power, but the very source code of reality in the lands between, a collection of great runes that define the fundamental laws governing life, death, and everything between. With this power, Marika establishes what will become known as the Golden Order, a philosophical and theological framework that seeks nothing less than the perfection of all existence. The Golden Order represents a radical departure from what came before, where the Crucible celebrated the wild intermixing of all life, the chaotic blending of forms and essences. The Golden Order demands purity, separation, and refinement. Marika and her scholars, chief among them the learned Gold Mask, who would later question these very foundations, develop a comprehensive system of beliefs that categorizes life into hierarchies of perfection. At the pinnacle stands the Erd Tree itself, now transformed from its primordial crucible origins into something more refined, more golden, more ordered. The tree's sap no longer flows with the wild vitality of the crucible, but instead becomes the amber starlight, a substance of pure golden grace. The very light that emanates from the Erd Tree changes, becoming less the warm red gold of primordial life and more the cold, pure gold of refined order. This philosophical shift has immediate and brutal consequences. The crucible, once revered as the source of all life, becomes anathema to the new order. The Golden Order's scholars and theologians begin teaching that the crucible represents an imperfect, primitive stage of existence that must be overcome. The aspects of the crucible, those physical manifestations of its power that include horns, wings, tails, and the intermixing of animal and human features, are reclassified from blessings to impurities. What was once sacred becomes heretical. The Crucible Knights, those elite warriors who had served in the age before and bore the Crucible's aspects as marks of honor, find themselves increasingly marginalized. While the most prominent among them, like Ordovis and Siluria, retain positions of respect due to their undeniable martial prowess and their service to the throne, they are relics of a bygone age, tolerated but no longer celebrated. The Golden Order does not simply declare the Crucible heretical and leave it at that. Instead, Marika's regime launches a systematic campaign to eradicate or suppress all trace of the Crucible's influence throughout the lands between. This campaign operates on multiple fronts simultaneously. Physically, sites associated with the Crucible are destroyed, buried, or repurposed. Temples that once celebrated the primordial unity of life are torn down or converted into churches of the Golden Order. The minor Erd trees, those smaller manifestations of the great tree's power, are planted strategically across the land, their golden roots literally overriding the old crucible sites, strangling out the red gold vitality that once flowed there. Intellectually and historically, the campaign is even more insidious. The Golden Order begins a comprehensive rewriting of history itself. Scholars loyal to Marika compile new texts, new histories that either omit the Crucible entirely or reframe it as a primitive, chaotic force that the enlightened Golden Order rightfully superseded. Ancient texts that speak too favorably of the Crucible are gathered and destroyed. The oral traditions of various cultures across the lands between are suppressed. Those who speak too openly about the old ways find themselves branded as heretics, subject to imprisonment or worse. This historical revisionism is so thorough that by the time you, the tarnished, arrive in the lands between centuries later, the true origins of the Erd Tree and its relationship to the Crucible have been almost completely obscured, known only to the most ancient beings and the most dedicated scholars willing to risk heresy for truth. The most visible and horrifying aspect of the Golden Order's campaign against the Crucible manifests in its treatment of those who bear Crucible features in their very bodies. Chief among these are the Omen, individuals born with horns and other mutations that mark them as touched by the Crucible's lingering influence. The birth of an omen child is considered a curse, a cosmic affront to the Golden Order's ideals of purity and perfection. These children, through no fault of their own, carry in their bodies the physical evidence of the Crucible's enduring power, proof that the primordial chaos cannot be entirely suppressed, no matter how much golden light Marika pours across the land. The persecution of the omen is systematic and institutionalized. Among the common people, omen children are often killed at birth, their existence considered too shameful to acknowledge. Those who survive face a life of brutal marginalization, but it is among the nobility that the true horror of the Golden Order's treatment of omen becomes most apparent, because even the highborn are not immune to the Crucible's touch. When omen children are born to noble families, they cannot simply be disposed of without scandal. Instead, they are subjected to ritualistic dehorning, a practice so brutal and traumatic that it frequently results in death. This procedure, carried out by specialized practitioners, involves the forcible removal of the horns that grow from an omen's body. These horns are not mere protrusions, but are deeply connected to the omen's life force, their very being. The dehorning process is agonizing beyond description, and those who survive are left physically and psychologically scarred, their connection to the crucible violently severed but never entirely erased. The horns themselves, once removed, are not simply discarded. In a grim irony, these symbols of the crucible's power are sometimes fashioned into weapons and tools by the very order that condemns them. The practice reveals the Golden Order's hypocrisy, willing to exploit the power of the crucible, even as it condemns those who naturally embody it. The omen who survive dehorning are marked forever, often kept hidden away in the bowels of castles and estates, their existence acknowledged but never celebrated, living proof of their family's shame. Not all omen are dehorned, however. In the deepest parts of Leyndell, the royal capital, beneath the golden streets and grand architecture, lie the subterranean shunning grounds, a vast network of sewers and catacombs where omen are imprisoned en masse. Here, those deemed too dangerous or too visibly marked by the crucible to be allowed even limited freedom are chained and forgotten. The shunning grounds become a nightmare realm, a place where the Golden Order literally buries its sins, hiding away the evidence that its perfect world is built on a foundation of persecution and cruelty. The omen imprisoned here are left to languish in darkness, fed just enough to survive, their existence a perpetual punishment for the crime of being born. Parallel to this persecution, the Golden Order introduces and codifies the concept of grace. Grace is described as the golden light of the Ear Tree made manifest, a blessing that guides those favored by Marika and the greater will toward their destined purpose. Those who possess grace can see the guidance of grace, golden streams of light that point them toward their fate. Grace becomes the ultimate marker of worthiness in the Golden Order's hierarchy. To possess grace is to be acknowledged by the divine order itself, to have a place in Marika's perfect world. To lack grace, conversely, is to be cast out, to be tarnished, a term that will gain terrible significance in the ages to come. The concept of grace serves multiple purposes for the Golden Order. It provides a theological justification for the existing power structure. Those in power possess grace and therefore deserve their positions. It offers hope and purpose to the faithful, the promise that if they serve the Golden Order diligently, they too might be blessed with grace. And it provides a convenient mechanism for identifying and excluding those who do not fit into Marika's vision of perfection. As the Golden Order consolidates its power, the Erd Tree's influence expands dramatically across the lands between. The tree grows ever larger, its roots spreading beneath the earth, its branches reaching toward the heavens. The golden light it emits becomes omnipresent, visible from nearly every corner of the realm. This light is not merely illumination, but a constant reminder of the Golden Order's dominion, a visual manifestation of Marika's power that touches everything and everyone. The Erd Tree becomes the literal and figurative center of the world, the axis around which all life revolves. Cities and settlements orient themselves toward it. Pilgrimages to its base become sacred duties. The tree's presence is so overwhelming that it becomes impossible to imagine the lands between without it, which is precisely the point. By making the Erd Tree so central to existence, the Golden Order erases the memory of what came before, making its own rule seem natural, inevitable, eternal. The Golden Order's tenets are formalized during this era, codified into religious and legal doctrine that will govern the lands between for ages. These tenets emphasize order above all else, the belief that there is a proper place for everything and everyone, and that deviation from this order is both sin and crime. Purity is elevated as a supreme virtue, the rejection of mixing and chaos in favor of clear categories and distinctions. The chaotic primordial past, the age of the crucible, is explicitly rejected and condemned. The Golden Order teaches that history is a progression from chaos to order, from imperfection to perfection, and that the establishment of Marika's rule represents the culmination of this progression. These tenets are taught in every church, enforced by every knight, and woven into the very fabric of society. The ancient dragons, those magnificent beings who once ruled the skies and commanded the power of lightning itself, find themselves subjugated by the Golden Order's rise. The war between Marika's forces and the dragons is a defining conflict of this era. The dragons, led by their dragon lord Placidusax, who serves as Elden Lord in an age before Marika, represent an older order, a different cosmic arrangement. Their defeat and subjugation is essential to the Golden Order's claim of supremacy. Some dragons are killed outright, their power too great to be allowed to persist. Others are driven into hiding, retreating to remote mountain peaks and hidden valleys where the Golden Order's reach is limited. A few, most notably the dragon Grandsax, whose massive corpse will eventually pierce the walls of Leyndell itself, launch desperate assaults on the heart of the Golden Order, attacks that ultimately fail but leave lasting scars on the landscape. The subjugation of the dragons serves as a powerful symbol, proof that even the mightiest beings of the old world must bow before Marika's new order. The persecution of those with crucible blood extends beyond just the omen. Anyone bearing physical signs of the crucible's touch, whether horns, unusual growths, or other mutations, faces discrimination and violence. This creates a population of outcasts, individuals who must hide their true nature or flee to the margins of society. In response, hidden catacombs and prisons proliferate throughout the lands between. Some are official institutions of the Golden Order, like the shunning grounds, purpose-built to contain the impure. Others are created by the persecuted themselves, secret sanctuaries where those marked by the crucible can live without fear of dehorning or execution. These hidden spaces become repositories of forbidden knowledge, places where the old ways are remembered and the true history of the crucible is preserved, waiting for a time when it might be safe to speak such truths aloud again. The catacombs beneath the lands between grow into vast networks, entire cities of the damned existing just below the golden surface of Marika's perfect world, a constant reminder that the Golden Order's purity is maintained only through constant, brutal suppression of everything it deems imperfect. For centuries, the Golden Order reigned unchallenged, its laws written into the fabric of reality itself. The Erdtree stood as an eternal monument to Marika's dominion, and the demigods who served as her children grew in power and prestige. Yet even at the height of this golden age, Queen Marika the Eternal harbored a profound fear. Death, the one force that had claimed countless lives throughout history, remained a threat to her perfect order. And so, in an act that would reshape the very nature of existence in the lands between, Marika made a decision that would echo through the ages. She reached into the Elden Ring itself, the cosmic symbol of order that resided within her body, and removed the rune of death, the fundamental principle that governed mortality and the ending of all things. This was no simple feat. The rune of death, also known as destined death, was woven into the natural cycle of the world. It was the law that dictated every living thing must eventually perish, that souls must depart, and bodies must decay. By extracting this rune from the Elden Ring, Marika fundamentally altered the rules of existence. She entrusted this stolen fragment of cosmic law to Malekith, her loyal shadow and half-brother, a towering beast of a warrior who served as her most trusted guardian. Malekith was no ordinary protector. As an Empyrean's shadow, he was bound to Marika by fate itself, a connection deeper than blood or oath. He was a creature of immense power, and into his great black blade, Marika sealed the rune of death, locking away the very concept of true mortality. With destined death sealed away within Malekith's weapon, a strange new reality took hold across the lands between. The dead no longer truly died. Bodies could be destroyed, yes, and souls could be wounded, but the fundamental transition from life to death, the final severing of the spirit from the world, became impossible. The Erdtree itself became a vessel for recycling souls, drawing them back into its roots and eventually returning them to new life. This was the undying state, a condition that many inhabitants of the lands between came to see as a blessing. Warriors could fight without fear of permanent death. The faithful believed their souls would return to the Erdtree to be reborn in grace. Yet this was also a curse in disguise, for those who suffered could not find release, and those who were broken in body or spirit remained trapped in their torment, unable to pass beyond. For a time, this arrangement held. Malekith guarded the rune of death with absolute devotion, never allowing it to leave his sight. The Golden Order flourished under this new paradigm, where death had been conquered, or so it seemed. The demigods, Marika's divine offspring, believed themselves truly immortal, beyond the reach of any harm that could not be healed or undone. Godwyn the Golden, perhaps the most beloved of all Marika's children, embodied this golden age. He was a warrior of unmatched skill, a diplomat who had befriended even the ancient dragons, and a prince whose very presence seemed to radiate the grace of the Erdtree. He walked the halls of Leyndell, the capital city built around the base of the great tree, as a living symbol of the Golden Order's perfection. But in the shadows, far from the light of the Erdtree, a different kind of power was stirring. Ranni the Witch, daughter of Radagon and Rennala, was herself an Empyrean, one of the rare beings chosen by the Greater Will as a potential vessel for the Elden Ring. She had been granted her own shadow, a half-wolf warrior named Blad, and she had been groomed since birth to potentially succeed Marika as the vessel of the Elden Ring. Yet Rani wanted no part in this destiny. She had studied the stars, delved into forbidden sorceries, and learned the truths about the nature of the outer gods and their influence over the world. She saw the Golden Order not as a blessing, but as a cage, a system of control that bound all living things to the will of the greater will. And most of all, she despised her Empyrean flesh, the divine body that marked her as a potential puppet for forces beyond her control. Rani began to plot. If she could not escape her destiny through conventional means, she would do so through a radical act of rebellion. She would cast off her Empyrean flesh entirely, severing her connection to the greater will and the two fingers that served as its intermediaries. But to accomplish this, she needed something that had been locked away from the world. She needed destined death itself. Only the power that could truly end life could free her from the immortal prison of her divine body. And so Rani turned her attention to the one thing that could grant her this freedom, a fragment of the rune of death that Malekith guarded so jealously. The question of how Rani made contact with those who would help her steal this fragment remains shrouded in mystery, but the historical record points to a group known as the Black Knife Assassins. These were no ordinary killers. They were Numen women, members of the same long-lived race from which Queen Marika herself had originated. The Numen were known for their extended lifespans and their connection to lands beyond the lands between, and these particular Numen had been trained in the arts of stealth and murder to a supernatural degree. Some scholars believe that Rani made contact with them through her mother, Renala, who as Queen of Caria might have had connections to distant lands and secret societies. Others suggest that Blade, Rani's loyal shadow, served as the intermediary, using his own network of contacts to find those willing to commit an act of cosmic treason. What is known with certainty is that Rani succeeded in stealing a fragment of destined death from Malekith. The exact method of this theft remains unclear. Some believe she used her mastery of sorcery to create a distraction or an illusion. Others whisper that there was a traitor close to Malekith, someone who helped facilitate the theft. Regardless of the method, Rani obtained a piece of the rune of death, and she immediately set about preparing it for her purposes. She worked in secret, crafting a ritualistic dagger, a blade that would serve as the vessel for the stolen power. This was no ordinary weapon. It was imbued with the fundamental force of mortality itself, capable of killing not just the body, but the very soul, inflicting true death even in a world where death had been abolished. Rani provided this dagger to the Black Knife Assassins, along with specific instructions. The plan was audacious and terrible in its scope. On a night that would become known forever as the Night of Black Knives, the assassins would strike at the very heart of the Golden Order. They would infiltrate Leyndell, the capital city that stood beneath the Erd tree's golden boughs, and they would murder a demigod. Not just any demigod, but Godwyn the Golden himself, the most beloved son of Marika, the prince who embodied everything the Golden Order claimed to represent. His death would send shockwaves through the entire realm, shattering the illusions of immortality that the Golden Order had carefully cultivated. The Night of Black Knives arrived during the age of the Erd Tree, at the height of the Golden Order's power. The capital city of Leyndell was a fortress, protected by the mightiest warriors in the realm, patrolled by knights sworn to defend the royal family with their lives. Yet the Black Knife Assassins were not deterred. They moved through the shadows like whispers of wind, their forms barely visible even to trained eyes. They wore dark armor that seemed to drink in light, and they moved with a preternatural silence that defied detection. These were women who had trained for decades, perhaps centuries, in the art of assassination, and they wielded not just conventional weapons, but the stolen power of destined death itself. The assassins infiltrated the inner sanctums of Leyndell, bypassing guards and wards alike. They made their way to where Godwin the Golden resided, perhaps in his chambers, perhaps in a garden beneath the Erd tree's light. The historical accounts are fragmentary, pieced together from traumatized witnesses and forensic evidence examined long after the fact. What is certain is that the Black Knife assassins found their target, and they struck with the ritualistic dagger that Rani had prepared. The blade, infused with the rune of death, pierced Godwin's divine flesh, and in that moment, something unprecedented occurred. Godwin the Golden became the first demigod to truly die. The power of destined death, which had been locked away for so long, surged through his body. But the death that claimed him was strange and incomplete. The ritualistic dagger, imbued with only a fragment of the rune of death, killed Godwin's soul but left his body alive. This was not the natural death that mortals experienced, where body and soul departed together. Instead, Godwin's golden soul was slain, severed from existence, while his physical form remained in the world, breathing and living, but empty of the spirit that had once inhabited it. He became something new and horrible, a being that would later be known as the Prince of Death, the first of those who live in death, a corruption that would spread like a plague across the lands between. At the precise moment that Godwin's soul died in Leyndell, Rani enacted the second part of her plan. She took the other half of the stolen destined death, the portion she had kept for herself, and she used it to slay her own Empyrean flesh. While Godwin's soul died and his body lived, Rani's body died and her soul survived. She cast off the divine form that had marked her as a vessel for the greater will, freeing herself from the destiny that had been imposed upon her. Her physical body perished, but her spirit endured, and through sorcerous means she had prepared in advance, she bound her soul to a doll, a puppet body that would serve as her new vessel. The simultaneous deaths created a curse, a metaphysical wound in the fabric of reality. Godwin's soulless body and Rani's bodiless soul were two halves of a sundered whole, a death that had been split and twisted into something unnatural. This curse would have far-reaching consequences. Godwin's living corpse would be interred beneath the capital, but death could not truly claim him. Instead, his body began to spread corruption, growing roots and tendrils that burrowed deep into the earth, spreading the death blight that would create the undead abominations known as those who live in death. Rani, meanwhile, had achieved her goal of escaping her Empyrean destiny, but at a terrible cost that would haunt the realm for ages to come. When Queen Marika learned of Godwin's death, her reaction was immediate and catastrophic. Godwin had been her favorite, the child who most perfectly embodied her vision for the Golden Order. His murder shattered something fundamental within her. Some say it was grief that drove her to madness. Others believe it was rage at the realization that her attempt to conquer death had been circumvented, that even with the rune of death sealed away, her children were not truly safe. Whatever the reason, Marika's response was to commit an act of unthinkable rebellion against the very order she had established. She took up her hammer, and in a moment of divine fury, she shattered the Elden Ring itself. The shattering of the Elden Ring was not merely symbolic. The ring was the fundamental law of reality, the cosmic structure that held the world together. When Marika struck it with her hammer, she fractured the laws of nature itself. The great runes, fragments of the Elden Ring that embodied different aspects of its power, scattered across the lands between. The demigods, Marika's children and stepchildren, each claimed a great rune for themselves, and in doing so, they became corrupted by the power they wielded. The unity of the Golden Order collapsed in an instant, replaced by war and chaos. This was the beginning of the shattering, the cataclysmic conflict that would consume the realm for ages to come. In the aftermath of the Night of Black Knives, the assassins themselves scattered. Some remained hidden in the lands between, lurking in catacombs and ruins, their purpose fulfilled, but their existence now a liability to those who had employed them. Others fled, perhaps returning to the distant lands of the Numen, carrying with them the secret of what they had done. The Black Knife armor and weapons they had wielded remained as evidence of their deed, occasionally discovered by those brave or foolish enough to explore the darkest corners of the realm. Malekith, the guardian who had failed in his sacred duty, was consumed by guilt and shame. The rune of death had been stolen on his watch, and the consequences of that theft had torn the world apart. He retreated to Farum Azula, the crumbling city that existed outside of time itself, a place where the ancient dragons had once ruled before the age of the Erdtree. There, in that timeless ruin, suspended in a perpetual storm, Malekith took up his eternal vigil. He became the beast clergyman, guarding the remaining power of destined death with a zealotry born of guilt, forever seeking to prevent anyone else from claiming the power he had failed to protect. His black blade remained hungry, forever seeking to reclaim the fragments of death that had been stolen, a guardian who would never forgive himself for the night the world changed forever. With the rune of death stolen and Godwyn the Golden slain, the lands between were plunged into an unprecedented crisis. It was in the very heart of the age of the Erdtree that Queen Marika, the vessel of the Elden Ring and the eternal sovereign of the lands between, made a choice that would irrevocably alter the destiny of her world. Driven by motivations that remain shrouded in mystery, though theories abound, Marika shattered the Elden Ring itself. Was it a desperate act to free her beloved lands between from the stifling, often cruel influence of the greater will, the outer god that had imposed the Golden Order upon them? Or perhaps it was a rebellion, a direct challenge to the cosmic authority that had dictated her every move and the very fabric of reality? Whatever her true intent, the consequences were cataclysmic. The Elden Ring, the fundamental concept of order and the very source of the Golden Order's power, fractured into countless pieces, sending ripples of chaos across the realm. This shattering had an immediate and devastating effect. The rune of death, previously sealed away within Malekith, the Black Blade, was now fully unleashed. This meant that true death, a concept largely absent from the lands between under the Golden Order's sway, became a terrifying reality. Before Marika's act, demigods were thought to be immortal, their spirits returning to the Erdtree upon their physical demise. But with the rune of death unbound, even these powerful beings could suffer a permanent end. The first and most prominent victim of this new, terrifying reality was Godwyn the Golden, whose earlier assassination by the Black Knives had only claimed his soul. Now, his body too succumbed to the true finality of death, a horrific event that would have profound implications for the world's natural order and the cycle of life and death. As the Elden Ring splintered, its most significant fragments, known as Great Runes, were claimed by Marika's demigod children. These great runes were not mere trinkets, they were shards of the very concept of order, imbued with immense, almost divine power. Each demigod who claimed one became a shard bearer, and while the great runes granted them unimaginable strength, they also carried a profound, insidious corruption. This corruption was not necessarily physical, but rather a twisting of their ambitions, a magnification of their flaws, and an insatiable hunger for even more power. The once united family of demigods, now wielding these potent artifacts, found themselves increasingly at odds, their individual desires amplified, and their sense of unity shattered alongside the Elden Ring itself. Among these newly empowered shard bearers was Millennia, Blade of Miquella, one of Marika's twin children with Radagon. Millennia was already afflicted by the Scarlet Rot, a devastating and incurable disease that slowly consumed her body and mind. This rot, a manifestation of an outer god known as the God of Rot, was a constant, excruciating torment. With the shattering, and perhaps the increased stress and exposure to raw power, Millennia struggled even more profoundly to contain the insidious spread of the disease. Her existence became a constant battle, not just against external foes, but against the very corruption within her own flesh, a struggle that would ultimately define her tragic fate. Another powerful shard bearer was Radon, General of the Star Scourge, one of Marika's children with Radagon. Radon, a colossal figure of immense strength and martial prowess, used his great rune to perform an act of incredible cosmic defiance. He halted the movement of the stars themselves. This seemingly impossible feat was driven by a deep-seated desire to protect the Carrion royal family, particularly his foster sister Rani, and to prevent the rise of the Dark Moon. The Carrion family, known for their mastery of glintstone sorcery and their connection to the moon, had a destiny intertwined with the celestial bodies. By freezing the stars, Radon sought to prevent a prophecy or a cosmic alignment that he believed would bring ruin to them or usher in an era he wished to avert. His act had profound implications for the natural order of the cosmos, creating a static celestial sphere above the lands between. The ambitions fueled by the great runes, coupled with the absence of a unifying force, inevitably led to a devastating conflict, the Shattering. This was not a localized skirmish, but an all-out war that engulfed the entire lands between. Demigod fought demigod, armies clashed, and the land itself bore the scars of their destructive power. Each shard-bearer, driven by their amplified desires for dominion, sought to claim control of the lands between and gather the remaining great runes, believing that possessing them all would grant them ultimate power and the ability to mend the fractured Elden Ring in their own image. The once prosperous realm was torn apart by this internecine conflict, its people suffering immensely under the relentless onslaught. During this tumultuous period, Renala, Queen of the Full Moon and the former consort of Radagon, found herself directly in the path of the war. She was defeated by Radagon of the Golden Order, her former husband, who had since abandoned her and their children, Rani, Radon, and Rykard, to become Marika's second consort. This defeat further cemented the Golden Order's dominance and left the Carrion royal family in a precarious position, their power diminished and their queen heartbroken and vulnerable. Radagon's abandonment of Renala was a significant event, highlighting his unwavering loyalty to the greater will and the Golden Order, even at the expense of his own family. Among the shard bearers, Godric the Grafted stood out as perhaps the weakest. Lacking the raw power or strategic brilliance of his siblings, Godric, a descendant of Godfrey and Marika, fled to Limgrave, a region far from the main theaters of war. In a desperate and gruesome attempt to gain power, he began grafting body parts onto himself. He would capture tarnished and other unfortunate souls, sever their limbs, and surgically attach them to his own body, believing that by accumulating these parts, he could absorb their strength and overcome his inherent weakness. This grotesque practice became his defining characteristic, a testament to his insecurity and his insatiable, albeit pathetic, hunger for power. The most cataclysmic clash of the Shattering occurred in Caelid, a region that would forever bear the scars of the battle. Malenia, the Blade of Miquella, and Radon, General of the Star Scourge, engaged in a duel of epic proportions. This was not merely a fight between two powerful demigods, it was a clash of ideologies and destinies. Radon, with his colossal strength and mastery of gravitational magic, held the upper hand for much of the fight. However, pushed to her absolute limit, and perhaps driven by a desperate need to protect her brother Miquella, Malenia unleashed the full, devastating power of the Scarlet Rot. In a horrifying burst of pestilence, she transformed into the goddess of Rot, her body becoming a conduit for the outer god's destructive power. This act blighted Caelid beyond recognition, turning it into a festering wasteland of scarlet flowers, mutated creatures, and a perpetual crimson haze. The aftermath left Radon a mindless husk, his mind consumed by the rot, wandering the desolate plains of Caelid, forever locked in a state of insatiable hunger. Malenia, too, was left in a comatose state, her body severely weakened and her consciousness fading. In the wake of Malenia's self-destructive act, her twin brother Miquella, a demigod of immense wisdom and compassion, continued his tireless efforts. Miquella, who possessed the unique ability to compel affection and was revered by many, sought a cure for Malenia's scarlet rot and dreamed of creating a new, unalloyed golden order. Unlike the Greater Will's golden order, Miquella's vision was one of inclusivity and purity, free from the flaws and curses that plagued the lands between. He had even crafted the Halig tree, a sacred tree designed to nurture and heal as part of his grand plan. However, before he could fully realize his ambitions, he was abducted by Mog, Lord of Blood, another of Marika's children, albeit one born from a different, darker union. Mog, a worshipper of the Formless Mother, an outer god of primordial blood, sought to make Miquella his consort and establish a new dynasty, a grotesque and perverse vision of a new world order fueled by blood and corruption. Miquella's abduction was a tragic setback, robbing the lands between of its most benevolent potential savior. With the Elden Ring shattered, the demigods warring, and the land itself blighted, the lands between were plunged into an era of unprecedented chaos and decay. The Erd Tree, once a beacon of grace and prosperity, withdrew its blessing from many of its inhabitants. Those who had once been guided by its golden light now found themselves forsaken, their purpose lost, their spirits adrift. This withdrawal of grace led to the rise of the Tarnished, exiles who had long ago been banished from the lands between for reasons unknown, stripped of their grace, and condemned to wander. Now, in this time of desperation, a new hope began to stir for them. Amidst the desolation, a sanctuary emerged, the Round Table Hold. This ethereal, non-physical space became a gathering point for those tarnished who could still perceive the faint glimmer of grace. It was a place of refuge, a forum for counsel, and a staging ground for their eventual return to the lands between. Here, the Tarnished could find guidance, share knowledge, and prepare for the arduous journey ahead, a journey that would inevitably lead them towards the shattered remnants of the Golden Order. Finally, in a desperate attempt to restore order and reassert its dominion, the Two Fingers, emissaries of the Greater Will, began to stir. These colossal, ancient entities, conduits for the outer god's will, began to summon the Tarnished back to the lands between. They believed that among these long exiled warriors, one would prove worthy, one would rise above the others, and one would become the Elden Lord. Their ultimate hope was that this chosen Tarnished would mend the Elden Ring, restore the Golden Order to its former glory, and once again bring the lands between under the complete sway of the Greater Will, thus ending the age of chaos and ushering in a new era of their divine rule. The stage was set for a new chapter, one where the fate of the lands between would rest on the shoulders of these forgotten heroes. As the dust of the shattering began to settle, a new and perhaps even more insidious horror began to bloom across the lands between, primarily centered around the region of Kyled. We are now firmly in the post-shattering era, a time marked by the demigods' fractured rule and the lingering scars of their devastating war. This period is intrinsically linked to the terrifying power of the Scarlet Rot, an outer god of decay and rebirth that had lain dormant, or at least contained, for centuries. Our story here begins with General Radon, one of Marika's most formidable children. Radon, a colossal figure even among demigods, was born with the distinctive red mane that marked him as a descendant of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and possessed an indomitable spirit. More than just a warrior, Radon was also a master of gravity magic, a rare and potent art. He learned this magic not for conquest, but for a truly selfless purpose, to defy the very stars themselves. You see, the outer god of the Scarlet Rot, an entity of immense and destructive power, was intrinsically linked to celestial movements. To prevent its return, or at least its full resurgence, Radahn used his formidable gravity magic to literally hold the stars in place over Caelid. This was an act of incredible sacrifice, as it tethered him to the blighted landscape and demanded constant exertion of his power. He did this to protect the lands between from the ultimate plague, a testament to his noble character before the rot consumed him. His efforts, though ultimately insufficient to prevent the coming tragedy, bought precious time and demonstrated a foresight and dedication to the realm that few other demigods possessed. Without Radhan's constant vigil, the outer god's influence might have manifested far earlier and with even greater devastation. However, even Radhan's monumental efforts could not deter another demigod, Millennia, Blade of Miquella. Millennia, one of the twin children of Marika and Radagon, was cursed from birth with the Scarlet Rot, a horrifying affliction that slowly consumed her body and mind. Her twin brother, Miquella, a prodigious Empyrean himself, dedicated his life to finding a cure for her condition, even going so far as to create the Haligtree, a sacred haven intended to cleanse the rot. It was Miquella's desperate quest for a cure and his eventual slumber within the Haligtree that spurred Millennia to action. Driven by an unwavering loyalty to her brother and a fierce determination to protect him and their shared dream, Millennia embarked on a perilous journey to Caelid. Her objective was clear: challenge General Radahn. The strategic implication was that Radahn's defeat would open a path for Miquella's unhindered ascent, or at least remove a major obstacle to his plans. Though the exact connection between Radahn's star holding and Michaela's quest remains a subject of much speculation among scholars of the lands between. What is undeniable is Millennia's resolve, fueled by her love for Michaela and her own ongoing battle against the rot. She was not merely a warrior, but a demigod of unparalleled skill in combat, her prosthetic arm and legs belying a grace and lethality that few could match. The stage was set for a titanic clash in the red sands of Kyled. Radon, despite his immense power, the very force that held the stars in check, was unable to defeat Millennia. Their battle was not a quick skirmish, but a prolonged and devastating engagement, a maelstrom of gravity magic and razor-sharp blades that tore apart the very landscape. Millennia, with her fluid and relentless attacks, danced around Radon's colossal might, her every move a testament to her mastery of the blade. Radon, in turn, brought down meteors and crushed the earth with his gravity magic, attempting to overwhelm her with sheer force. The sheer scale of their conflict is almost unimaginable, a demigod of cosmic power against a demigod of peerless martial prowess. Neither could gain a decisive advantage, and the prolonged struggle began to take its toll on both. Millennia, though seemingly invincible in her movements, was constantly fighting her own internal battle against the scarlet rot. The exertion, the wounds, and the sheer length of the conflict pushed her to her absolute limit. It was in this crucible of war that the inevitable occurred. Millennia, pushed beyond her physical and mental endurance, finally succumbed to the full, horrifying power of the scarlet rot within her. The dormant affliction, a constant companion and tormentor, erupted from her in a catastrophic release. This was not a controlled burst of power, but a desperate, agonizing transformation. The rot, a living entity within her, took over, twisting her body and mind into something monstrous. She ceased to be merely Malenia, the blade of Michaela, and became an avatar of the outer god itself. With a horrifying shriek, Millennia unleashed the full power of the scarlet rot, transforming into a monstrous bloom. This was the Scarlet Ionia, her ultimate attack, a devastating explosion of pestilence and decay. The impact was cataclysmic. The land of Kyled, already scarred by the shattering and the ongoing battle, was utterly devastated. A massive crater, a gaping wound in the earth, marked the epicenter of the blast. The very air became thick with spores, and the ground turned a sickly red and orange as the rot spread outwards like a cancerous growth. Radon, caught in the blast, was not spared. The scarlet rot, an incurable plague, seeped into his colossal form, infecting him from within. The once proud general, who had held the stars in defiance of this very blight, was now its victim. The Scarlet Aeonia was not merely an attack. It was a biological weapon of unimaginable scale, reshaping the very ecosystem of Kyled in its wake. In the aftermath of this apocalyptic event, Millennia, her body now a withered husk of its former glory, lay unconscious. Her will to fight, her consciousness, had been utterly consumed by the rot's full manifestation. She was no longer capable of motion or thought, a mere vessel for the virulent plague. It was then that her loyal clean-wrought knight, Finley, a knight who had sworn an oath to protect her, stepped forward. Despite the horrific conditions, the pervasive rot, and the sheer danger of the blighted land, Finley valiantly carried Millennia's inert form away from the battlefield. This was no easy feat, given Millennia's demigod stature, even in her weakened state. Finley embarked on an arduous journey, traversing the treacherous lands between, all the way back to the Haligtree, the sanctuary Michaela had created. This act of unwavering loyalty, of carrying a demigod across a ravaged continent, speaks volumes about the devotion Millennia inspired in her followers, even as she became the very thing they fought against. Meanwhile, Radan, though still alive, had been utterly broken by the scarlet rot. The plague had ravaged his mind and body, twisting him into a grotesque parody of his former self. The once noble general, who had mastered gravity and held the stars, was now a mindless beast. His colossal form, once a symbol of strength and defiance, became a testament to suffering. Driven by an insatiable hunger, a symptom of the rot's insidious influence, he began to feast on the corpses of his own soldiers, those who had fallen in the battle against Millennia. This horrifying transformation was a cruel irony for a warrior of his caliber, reduced to a feral creature in the very lands he sought to protect. His sanity was gone, replaced by a primal instinct, his immense power now aimless and destructive, a constant threat to anything that dared to approach him. Caelid, the once proud land of the Redmane Knights, became a blighted wasteland. The Scarlet Aeonia had permanently altered its ecosystem, transforming it into a grotesque landscape of decay and mutation. The vibrant flora and fauna were replaced by twisted, diseased forms. The very air was thick with the stench of rot and decay, and the ground was a sickly crimson. Mutated creatures, born from the rot's influence, roamed the desolate plains, their bodies twisted into horrifying shapes. Fungal growths, pulsating with an unnatural light, sprouted from every surface, further cementing Caelid's transformation into a living testament to the devastating power of the scarlet rot. It was a land utterly consumed, a stark warning of the outer god's destructive potential. Even Millennia's elite warriors, the Cleanrot Knights, were not immune to the pervasive plague. These knights, renowned for their unwavering loyalty and martial prowess, had followed Millennia into the heart of Caelid. In the aftermath of the Scarlet Aeonia, many of them were afflicted by the very rot they had sworn to fight. Their bodies slowly began to decay, their armor corroding, their flesh succumbing to the virulent disease. Yet even in their suffering, their loyalty to Millennia remained unbroken. They continued to serve her, their decaying forms a stark reminder of the rot's insidious grip and a testament to their unbreakable vows. They became living, breathing symbols of the rot's agonizing progression, their very existence a form of slow, torturous martyrdom. The influence of the rot goddess, the outer god of the scarlet rot, spread unchecked throughout Caelid. This terrifying force of decay and rebirth, once confined within Millennia, now permeated the entire region. It was a force that did not merely destroy, but transformed. The flora and fauna of Caelid were twisted into grotesque forms, becoming extensions of the rot itself. Giant, pus-filled flowers bloomed in the blighted soil, and the very ground seemed to breathe with a sickly, infectious life. The region became a living, breathing testament to the outer god's power, a horrifying ecosystem dedicated to its principles of decay and rebirth, a cycle that offered no true end to suffering. Witnessing the tragic fate of their beloved general, the remaining Redmane Knights, those who had survived the cataclysm and had not fled the blighted lands, were faced with an unbearable reality. Their once noble leader, General Radan, was now a mindless, suffering beast, a prisoner of the scarlet rot. In a desperate act of loyalty and compassion, they established the Radan Festival. This wasn't a celebration in the traditional sense, but a solemn and brutal ritual. Their goal was to gather the greatest warriors from across the lands between, to challenge their general in a grand battle, hoping that a worthy opponent could grant him a warrior's death and release him from his agonizing suffering. It was a final act of devotion, a desperate plea for an end to their general's torment, and a testament to the profound respect and love they still held for the shattered demigod. And so, the region of Kaled became a constant source of fear, a blighted land that served as a stark and horrifying warning. It stood as a monument to the destructive potential of the outer god of the Scarlet Rot, a chilling reminder of what happens when such cosmic forces are unleashed upon the lands between. Its festering landscapes, its mutated inhabitants, and the tragic tale of its fallen general all whispered a single, terrifying truth. The Scarlet Rot was an enemy unlike any other, a force that could corrupt, transform, and utterly destroy, leaving only despair and decay in its wake. While the Haligtree offered a fragile sanctuary for those seeking refuge from the shattering, a far more sinister plot was already unfolding, one that would irrevocably alter the fate of one of its most vulnerable inhabitants. In the turbulent years post-shattering, a period marked by chaos and the fragmentation of the Golden Order, Mog, Lord of Blood, and Omen demigod, and one of Marika's many children, executed a daring and audacious abduction. His target was none other than Miquella, the Empyrean twin brother of Millennia, Blade of Miquella. Miquella, known for his unalloyed gold and his attempts to cure curses, lay in a state of perpetual slumber within the Haligtree, a magnificent, albeit decaying structure he had cultivated himself. Mog, driven by a twisted ambition and a profound sense of isolation, saw in Miquella not just a sibling, but a vessel, a means to achieve his own vision of a new world order. He infiltrated the Haligtree, a feat of stealth and power given its formidable defenses, and, with an unknown but undoubtedly brutal method, spirited away the unconscious Miquella. The exact circumstances of this abduction remain shrouded in mystery, but the outcome was clear. Miquella, the beloved and revered Empyrean, was gone, leaving behind a devastated Millennia and a power vacuum within the Haligtree's already fractured society. Mog's destination was not within the familiar confines of the lands between, but a hidden, blood-soaked realm known as Mugwin Palace. This subterranean sanctuary, accessible only through obscure means, became the stage for Mug's grand, horrifying designs. He transported the still unconscious Miquella to this macabre stronghold, where the Empyrean would become the unwitting centerpiece of Mog's blasphemous rituals. It was within the depths of Mugwin Palace that Mog's true patron, the Formless Mother, an outer god, revealed her full influence. The Formless Mother, unlike the Greater Will or the Frenzied Flame, is an entity of pure, unadulterated blood and primordial chaos, a being that thrives on suffering and seeks to usher in an age of grotesque rebirth. She chose Mog, with his Omen heritage and his innate connection to blood, as her Empyrean. This designation, typically reserved for those chosen by the Greater Will to potentially succeed Marika as gods, was a perverse twist, a dark mirror of the divine order. The Formless Mother bestowed upon Mog immense power, a corrupting influence that manifested as blood flame, a searing crimson fire that both destroys and regenerates in a horrifying cycle. This power, a direct conduit to the outer god, fueled Mog's ambition and solidified his resolve to establish a new dynasty. With the Formless Mother's backing, Mog formally established the Mugwin dynasty. This was not a kingdom in the traditional sense, but a hidden, blood-soaked realm, a perverse parody of the Golden Order's aspirations. It existed entirely separate from the lands between, a clandestine dominion where the laws of nature and morality were warped by the Formless Mother's influence. Mog, now Lord of Blood and the Formless Mother's chosen Empyrean, saw himself as the progenitor of a new age, an era defined by blood and the grotesque rebirth of all things. His ultimate goal was to raise Miquella to godhood, not as a benevolent deity, but as his consort, a puppet ruler in his blood-soaked empire. This twisted desire was fueled by the Formless Mother's insidious whispers, which promised Mog ultimate power and a place alongside his chosen god. He genuinely believed that Miquella, as an Empyrean, was destined for godhood, and he, Mog, was merely accelerating this fated ascension, albeit through a horrifying, forced transformation. Mog envisioned himself as the true founder of this new dynasty, with Miquella as its figurehead, a union that would solidify his power and usher in an age of blood. The Formless Mother's outer god influence permeated every aspect of Mogwin Palace and Mog's twisted ideology. Her power promoted a grotesque, bloody rebirth, a perversion of life and creation. This manifested most visibly in the blood flame incantations wielded by Mog and his followers, a searing crimson fire that burned with the essence of blood itself. It was a power that inflicted hemorrhage and decay, yet also promised a twisted form of regeneration, a cycle of suffering and renewal that was deeply unsettling. The very creatures inhabiting Mogwin Palace bore the scars of this influence, becoming blood-starved and monstrous, their forms twisted and corrupted by the pervasive blood magic. They were living testaments to the Formless Mother's destructive and transformative power, their existence a constant reminder of the horrific vision Mog sought to impose upon the world. Mog's attempts to awaken Miquella and initiate his ascension were relentless and deeply disturbing. He repeatedly anointed the unconscious Empyrean with his own blood, a ritualistic act intended to infuse Miquella with the Formless Mother's power and to bind him to Mog's will. This wasn't a gentle anointing, but a grotesque baptism, a constant deluge of Mog's omen blood upon Miquella's still childlike form. Mog believed that through this ritual, Miquella would awaken, transformed and ready to embrace his new destiny as the god of the Mogwin dynasty. He saw his blood not as a defilement, but as a sacred offering, a catalyst for Miquella's true potential. However, despite Mog's fervent ministrations and the constant flow of his blood, Miquella remained in a cocoon-like state. His body, encased in a massive, root-like structure, showed no signs of awakening. He remained unresponsive, his childlike form preserved in an eternal slumber, untouched by Mog's desperate attempts to force his transformation. This unresponsiveness, while frustrating for Mog, also highlighted the profound power of Miquella's own Empyrean nature, a resilience that even the Formless Mother's influence struggled to overcome. Mog's followers, drawn to the promise of power and the allure of the Formless Mother, flocked to Mogwin Palace. These included the blood-crazed misbegotten, grotesque creatures driven to madness by the pervasive blood magic, their bodies warped and their minds consumed by a thirst for blood. They were the foot soldiers of the Mogwin dynasty, their loyalty secured by the Formless Mother's power and Mog's blood flame. Other creatures, similarly twisted and corrupted, also found their way to the palace, forming a macabre ecosystem of blood-soaked beings. They were drawn by the sheer force of the Formless Mother's presence and the potent blood flame emanating from Mog, a beacon for all things grotesque and blood-hungry. These followers, a testament to the outer god's corrupting influence, served as Mug's loyal, albeit horrifying, army, ready to defend his nascent dynasty against any who dared to challenge it. Their presence further solidified Mogwin Palace as a realm utterly detached from the natural order of the lands between, a domain where the formless mother's will reigned supreme. It is into this horrifying tableau that the tarnished, the player character, eventually arrives. The journey to Mogwin Palace is itself a testament to the hidden and dangerous nature of this realm. The tarnished might discover it through the consecrated snowfield, a treacherous and often overlooked region of the lands between, requiring significant exploration and perseverance. Alternatively, a more direct, albeit equally unsettling path can be taken through Vara's questline. White-faced Vara, a mysterious and unsettling character encountered early in the Tarnished's journey, serves as an agent of Mohg, subtly guiding the Tarnished towards the Lord of Blood's perverse vision. Through a series of dark rituals and morally ambiguous choices, Vare offers the Tarnished a direct warp to Mogwin Palace, bypassing the arduous journey through the snowfield. This choice highlights the moral ambiguities inherent in the lands between, where even seemingly helpful characters can lead one down a path of darkness. Regardless of the route taken, the Tarnished's arrival at Mogwin Palace signifies a direct confrontation with Mog's ambitions and the formless mother's influence. Upon entering Mogwin Palace, the Tarnished is confronted with the full horror of Mog's domain. The air is thick with the scent of blood and decay, the very landscape stained crimson by the pervasive blood flame. The palace itself is a sprawling, cavernous structure, adorned with grotesque imagery and filled with the blood-crazed followers of Mog. The journey through the palace is a perilous one, culminating in the boss arena, where Mog, Lord of Blood, awaits. This arena, a grand, blood-soaked chamber, serves as the final stage for Mog's blasphemous rituals and his attempts to awaken Miquella. Here, the Tarnished witnesses firsthand the extent of Mog's power, fueled by the formless mother, as he unleashes devastating blood flame attacks and attempts to corrupt the Tarnished with his cursed blood. The confrontation with Mog is a brutal and challenging battle, a test of skill and resolve against an enemy who embodies the very essence of corruption and twisted ambition. Mog's battle cries and his desperate pleas to Miquella during the fight reveal the depth of his delusion and his unwavering belief in his perverse dynasty. The Tarnished, through sheer perseverance and combat prowess, ultimately defeats Mog, Lord of Blood. This victory is not merely the defeat of a powerful demigod, but the decisive end to his horrifying attempts to awaken Miquella and establish the Mogwin dynasty. With Mog's death, the formless mother's direct influence within the lands between is significantly diminished, though her presence as an outer god undoubtedly lingers in the background. The defeat of Mog also leaves Miquella's fate in a state of ambiguous stasis. While no longer subjected to Mog's grotesque ministrations, Miquella remains in his cocoon-like state, his awakening still a mystery and his ultimate destiny uncertain. The Mogwin dynasty, a blood-soaked dream born of twisted ambition, crumbles with its founder, leaving behind only the ruins of a horrifying vision. The Tarnished's intervention prevents a truly catastrophic outcome, averting the rise of a blood-soaked empire and the forced godhood of an unwilling Empyrean. However, the scars of Mog's actions and the lingering threat of the formless mother serve as a stark reminder of the pervasive darkness that continues to plague the lands between, even after his defeat. The victory against Moog marks a significant turning point, but it also opens new questions about Miquella's future and the enduring power of the outer gods. Following the dark machinations of the Mogwin dynasty and the Formless Mother's insidious influence, the lands between continued its descent into chaos. It is in this tumultuous, post shattering era, a time marked by widespread despair and the weakening of the Golden Order, that we witness the terrifying rise of the frenzied flame. This destructive force, an extension of an ancient, malevolent outer god known as the Three Fingers, seeks nothing less than the complete annihilation of all creation. Its ultimate goal is to return everything to a primordial, undifferentiated state, a singular burning chaos devoid of all life and form. This radical ideology stands in stark opposition to the very concept of the Erd Tree and the Golden Order, which seek to maintain and propagate life within a structured, albeit flawed, existence. The Three Fingers, unlike other outer gods who often work through intermediaries or subtle manipulations, is a direct, visceral force, its presence felt as an overwhelming urge to burn and destroy. The influence of this destructive entity manifests throughout the lands between as the frenzied flame itself, a searing yellow-orange conflagration that drives individuals to an irreversible state of madness. This is not merely a psychological affliction, but a physical and spiritual corruption, a burning from within that consumes both body and mind. The victims of the frenzied flame are often seen writhing in agony, their eyes glowing with an unnatural yellow light, their skin blistered and charred as if touched by an internal fire. Their cries are not of pain alone, but of a profound existential despair, a reflection of the Three Fingers' nihilistic vision. The spread of the frenzied flame is not accidental. It is a deliberate contagion, a virulent ideology that preys on the vulnerable and the desperate. Deep beneath the royal capital of Leyndell, within the labyrinthine depths of the subterranean shunning grounds, lies the very source of this cosmic horror. This sprawling subterranean network, originally designed to house and contain the unwanted and the abominable, ironically became the cradle of the greatest threat to all existence. It is here, in the deepest reaches, that the Three Fingers itself awaits, its colossal charred digits pressed against the very fabric of reality, constantly radiating the burning power of the frenzied flame. The architecture of the shunning grounds, with its oppressive atmosphere and twisting passages, perfectly mirrors the insidious nature of the flame it contains, a place of confinement that became a wellspring of boundless destruction. Those unfortunate souls who come into contact with the frenzied flame suffer an agonizing and irreversible transformation. The initial touch is often described as a searing pain, followed by a burning sensation that permeates every cell of their being. Their flesh blisters and blackens, their skin cracking and peeling away as if consumed by an internal fire. But the physical torment is merely a precursor to the true horror, the complete loss of their sanity. Their minds are shattered, their thoughts replaced by the singular, overwhelming compulsion to burn, to destroy, to reduce everything to ash. They become living conduits for the Three Fingers' will, their former identities erased, replaced by a burning, unthinking devotion to chaos. These individuals are often encountered as frenzied cultists, their movements erratic, their attacks imbued with the destructive power of the flame. Among the earliest and most significant figures to fall under the sway of the Three Fingers was Shabriri. Once a man of considerable influence, perhaps even a lord or a powerful sorcerer, Shabriri was cursed for his transgressions, his body becoming a living testament to his past misdeeds. This curse, rather than breaking him, inadvertently made him susceptible to the whispers of the three fingers. He became a willing vessel for its destructive will, his voice now an echo of the outer god's insidious dogma. Shabriri is not merely a follower, he is an evangelist, a propagandist for the frenzied flame, actively seeking out others to convert to its nihilistic cause. He appears to the tarnished, offering a seemingly simple solution to the burdens of their quest, a way to absolve themselves of the difficult choice of sacrificing a maiden. His words are laced with a deceptive allure, promising an end to suffering through a universal end to all things. He embodies the seductive power of despair, offering a radical, destructive path as a perverse form of liberation. One of Shabriri's most tragic and pivotal successes in spreading the frenzied flame's influence was his seduction of Vike. Vike, a tarnished of immense power and renown, had come agonizingly close to becoming Elden Lord, his journey mirroring the player's own in many respects. He had faced countless foes, overcome impossible odds, and stood on the precipice of achieving his destiny. However, the prospect of sacrificing his maiden, an essential ritual for kindling the Erd tree and becoming Elden Lord, weighed heavily on his soul. It was in this moment of profound moral anguish and desperation that Shabriri found him, whispering promises of an alternative, a way to spare his beloved maiden from the fiery sacrifice. Shabriri convinced Vike to embrace the frenzied flame. Vike, driven by love and a desperate desire to circumvent the cruel demands of the Golden Order, succumbed to the temptation, believing he was choosing the lesser of two evils. His choice, however, led him down a path of unspeakable horror. Upon embracing the frenzied flame, Vike's body was subjected to a horrific transformation. The searing power of the outer god coursed through him, leaving him with distinctive, agonizing burns that permanently scarred his flesh. These marks, visible even through his armor, serve as a constant reminder of his pact. But far more devastating than the physical scars was the complete erosion of his sanity. The love that once drove him to protect his maiden was twisted into a burning madness, a destructive impulse that mirrored the Three Fingers' own. He became a shadow of his former self, a tragic figure consumed by the very power he sought to wield for good. This madness drove him to invade other tarnished, including the player. His once noble intentions replaced by a frenzied desire to spread the flame, perhaps believing it to be the true path, or perhaps simply driven by the uncontrollable urges of his new master. His story serves as a stark warning of the deceptive allure and devastating consequences of the frenzied flame. Even more tragic than Vike's individual plight is the fate of the nomadic merchants. These ancient people, descendants of a proud and vibrant culture, held beliefs that diverged from the rigid doctrines of the Golden Order. Their unique customs, their distinctive flutes, and their wandering lifestyle were seen as an affront, a potential source of impurity or dissent by the ruling powers. As a result, they were subjected to brutal persecution. In a horrific act of cruelty, they were rounded up, their mouths sewn shut to silence their protests, and sealed alive within the very depths of the subterranean shunning grounds. This act of systematic extermination was not merely about suppression. It was a deliberate act of sacrifice intended to fuel the burgeoning power of the frenzied flame. Their suffering, their despair, their collective agony as they slowly perished in the darkness became a potent source of energy for the outer god. Their screams, echoing through the oppressive darkness of the shunning grounds, and their profound despair amplified the frenzied flame's power within those confined depths. Each dying breath, each silent tear, each flicker of hope extinguished, contributed to the growing intensity of the destructive fire. The subterranean shunning grounds, already a place of desolation, became a crucible of unimaginable suffering, its very air thick with the anguish of the massacred merchants. This collective torment served as a constant offering to the Three Fingers, strengthening its hold on the lands between and making its influence ever more pervasive. The silent, burning rage of these persecuted souls became a part of the flame itself, their suffering woven into its destructive essence. Amidst this rising tide of nihilism, Melina, the Tarnished's enigmatic maiden, expresses profound fear and unwavering opposition to the frenzied flame. Her knowledge, derived from her unique connection to the Erd tree and her role in guiding the Tarnished, allows her to understand the true, existential threat posed by the Three Fingers. She sees it not as an alternative path or a means to an end, but as the ultimate negation of all life, all hope, and all possibility. Her warnings are dire, her voice filled with a desperate urgency as she implores the Tarnished to reject this destructive path. She understands that embracing the frenzied flame is not merely a choice of destiny, but an act of cosmic suicide, a betrayal of everything the Erd tree represents, however flawed it may be. Her opposition is so absolute that she makes a solemn vow. If the Tarnished chooses to embrace the frenzied flame, she will hunt them down and deliver destined death. This is not an idle threat, but a testament to her profound conviction. Destined death, the true power of death that was sealed away by Queen Marika, is a force capable of ending even gods. Melina, in her capacity as a kindler of the Erd tree, and perhaps through her own mysterious origins, possesses a connection to this ancient power. Her willingness to wield such a devastating force against the Tarnished, whom she has guided and supported throughout their journey, underscores the ultimate horror she perceives in the frenzied flame. It reveals the depth of her commitment to preserving what little remains of life in the lands between, even if it means extinguishing the very being she helped to elevate. Despite Melina's dire warnings and the overwhelming evidence of its destructive nature, the Tarnished retains the choice to descend to the lowest depths of the subterranean shunning grounds. This perilous journey, fraught with the remnants of the massacred merchants and the mad cultists of the flame, leads to the very chamber where the Three Fingers resides. Here in the suffocating darkness, the Tarnished can choose to commune with this outer god, to willingly offer themselves as a vessel for its destructive power. It is a moment of profound decision, a final test of their will and their understanding of the true nature of the lands between. The path to the Three Fingers is not easily found, often requiring the Tarnished to strip themselves bare, both literally and metaphorically, symbolizing a shedding of their former allegiances and identities. Upon making this ultimate choice and embracing the frenzied flame, the Tarnished undergoes a horrific transformation, mirroring that of Vike and countless others. Their body is scarred by the searing heat of the outer god, their flesh bearing the indelible marks of their devotion. But the most striking and immediate change is in their eyes, which turn a vivid, unnatural yellow, glowing with the internal fire of the frenzied flame. This transformation is not merely cosmetic. It signifies a complete spiritual alignment with the Three Fingers, a devotion to the outer god's nihilistic vision. The Tarnished, once a beacon of hope for the lands between, becomes an agent of its ultimate destruction, their destiny irrevocably intertwined with the burning chaos of the frenzied flame. This choice leads to a unique ending, one where the entire world is consumed by fire, reduced to a single, undifferentiated inferno, fulfilling the Three Fingers' ancient desire. None of these horrors, however, quite prepare us for the sheer, unadulterated malevolence that begins to fester in the post-shattering era, with the emergence of the Dung Eater and his seedbed curse. This period, marked by the lingering chaos of the shattering of the Elden Ring and the subsequent abandonment of the Greater Will, saw the rise of individuals driven by extreme ideologies. Among them, the Dung Eater stands as a truly unique and deeply disturbing figure, a defiled omen himself, who sought not to merely survive, but to inflict a universal spiritual blight upon all life in the lands between. The Dung Eater, whose true name and origins are shrouded in layers of dread, is not merely a murderer, but a purveyor of a particularly insidious form of defilement. His victims are not simply killed, they are subjected to a ritualistic act of spiritual and physical degradation, ensuring that their souls, upon rebirth, would manifest as omens. The omen, as we have discussed, are those born with horns and other grotesque features, considered anathema by the Golden Order and often subjected to brutal shunning or even execution. This persecution, a cornerstone of the Golden Order's doctrine of purity and perfection, is the very foundation upon which the Dung Eater builds his horrifying ambition. His goal is not simply revenge, though a deep-seated resentment for the Golden Order's treatment of his kind undoubtedly fuels his actions. The Dung Eater's ambition is far grander, far more terrifying. He aims to curse all life in the lands between, to transform every living being into an omen, thereby creating a world where the very definition of purity and defilement is inverted. This would be the ultimate affront to the Golden Order, a complete subversion of their theological and societal structures. Imagine a world where every newborn is an omen, where the very act of birth is a source of shame and revulsion according to the Golden Order's tenets. This is the horrifying vision that drives the Dung Eater. The seedbed curse itself is not a physical disease, but a spiritual and genetic defilement, a deep-seated horror that permeates the very essence of a being. It represents a corruption at the fundamental level of existence, ensuring that the victim's lineage, and indeed their very soul, is forever tainted. The act of defiling a victim, as the Dung Eater does, involves a gruesome ritual, often performed on their dying or recently deceased bodies, where a specific, unholy essence is implanted. This essence, the seedbed curse, is then carried by the victim's soul, ensuring that their rebirth, should it occur, will be as an omen. This process is not merely about inflicting physical pain or death. It is about permanently altering the spiritual trajectory of an individual and their descendants, a horrifying perversion of the natural cycle of life and death. The Dung Eater's actions are, therefore, a direct and violent rebellion against the Golden Order's persecution of omens. He sees the Golden Order's doctrine of purity as a hypocrisy, a system built on the suffering of those deemed impure. By forcing the entire population to become omens, he believes he is exposing the inherent cruelty and arbitrary nature of the Golden Order's beliefs. It is a twisted form of liberation, a forced equality born from shared suffering. He seeks to dismantle the very concept of blessed and cursed by making the curse universal, thereby rendering the Golden Order's judgments meaningless. His methods are abhorrent, but his underlying motivation stems from a profound and understandable anger at the systemic oppression faced by his kind. He is a product of the Golden Order's own cruelty, a monstrous reflection of their intolerance. For his unspeakable atrocities, for the systematic defilement of countless victims, the Dung Eater was eventually apprehended and imprisoned. His confinement is not in some grand, visible dungeon, but in the subterranean shunning grounds, a sprawling sewage-filled labyrinth beneath Lanedell, the royal capital. This location is itself symbolic, a place where the unwanted and the grotesque are cast aside, mirroring the fate of the omens themselves. The shunning grounds are a testament to the Golden Order's desire to hide away anything that does not conform to their ideal of perfection, a place of forgotten horrors and discarded beings. It is here, amidst the filth and despair, that the Dung Eater's physical body is bound, a prisoner of the very system he seeks to dismantle. Yet, even while physically imprisoned, the Dung Eater's malevolent influence is far from quelled. His spirit, or perhaps a potent projection of his will, continues to operate, sending out a spectral avatar. This avatar is a chilling testament to his pervasive power and his unwavering determination to enact his curse. This spectral manifestation is not merely a fleeting illusion. It possesses a degree of agency and the ability to interact with the world, albeit in a limited capacity. It is through this avatar that the Dung Eater continues to plot and scheme, even from his subterranean prison. The most unnerving manifestation of this spectral avatar is its appearance in the Round Table Hold. The Round Table Hold, as you know, is a sanctuary, a place of respite and gathering for tarnished from across the lands between, a seemingly impenetrable haven from the external horrors. The presence of the Dung Eater's spectral form within these hallowed walls is deeply unsettling, demonstrating the insidious reach of his curse and his ability to infiltrate even the most sacred of spaces. It serves as a stark reminder that no place is truly safe from his influence, and that his ambition transcends physical barriers. His chilling laughter, his grotesque pronouncements, and his unwavering pursuit of his goal within the Round Table Hold underscore the depth of his depravity and the pervasive nature of his curse. His very presence there is an act of psychological warfare, a constant reminder of the encroaching horror he represents. While his spectral avatar roams, the Dung Eater's true body remains bound in the deepest recesses of the sewers, a prisoner of the subterranean shunning grounds. His cell is not a conventional one, but a dark, fetid chamber guarded by a solitary spirit. This guardian is not a knight or a soldier of the Golden Order, but a spirit of a lesser omen killer, a spectral echo of those who once hunted down and eradicated omens. This choice of guardian is deeply ironic, as it is the very persecution embodied by the omen killers that fueled the Dung Eater's hatred and his desire for universal defilement. The omen killer, a symbol of the Golden Order's intolerance, now stands guard over the ultimate consequence of that intolerance. To fully enact his ritual, to spread the seedbed curse across the entirety of the lands between, the Dung Eater requires 5 specific items, 5 seedbed curses. These are not easily acquired. They are the physical manifestations of his defilement collected from his victims. Each seedbed curse represents a soul irrevocably tainted, a life twisted into the form of an omen. The process of acquiring these curses is itself a gruesome undertaking, often requiring the player to venture into dangerous and defiled locations, encountering the lingering aftermath of the Dung Eater's atrocities. These curses are not merely MacGuffins, they are tangible symbols of his horrifying ambition, each one a testament to his unspeakable acts. Here, in this narrative, the player is presented with a profound and morally challenging choice. You, the Tarnished, can choose to aid the Dung Eater in his horrific quest. This decision is not taken lightly, as it involves actively participating in the spread of a curse that would fundamentally alter the nature of life in the lands between. To aid him, you must collect the 5 seedbed curses and deliver them to his imprisoned form. This act signifies a willingness to embrace a path of profound darkness, to align yourself with a being whose goals are antithetical to the very concept of a flourishing, uncursed existence. The implications of this choice are far reaching and deeply unsettling, forcing the player to confront the darkest aspects of the Elden Ring's lore and the moral ambiguities inherent in a world so utterly broken. If the player chooses to complete his quest line, to gather and feed him all 5 seedbed curses, the Dung Eater then consumes a potion provided by Celevis, the enigmatic and manipulative sorcerer. This potion is not a simple restorative. It is a transformative agent designed to turn its consumer into a puppet, a mindless thrall completely subservient to its master. Seluvis, ever the puppet master, sees an opportunity to harness the Dung Eater's immense power for his own inscrutable ends. The consumption of this potion marks a pivotal moment in the Dung Eater's narrative, as it transforms him from a vengeful, self-directed agent of chaos into a tool, albeit a terrifyingly potent one, in another's scheme. This transformation, however, does not diminish the Dung Eater's overall objective. Instead, it allows his spirit to be freed from its physical confines, no longer bound by the limitations of his imprisoned body. This liberation is not a release into freedom, but a release into a state of pure, unadulterated spiritual malice. His physical form, now a puppet, remains a husk, while his true essence, his horrifying will, is unleashed upon the lands between. This freed spirit, unburdened by a physical form, can now spread the seedbed curse with an unprecedented reach and efficacy. The horrifying vision of a world where all life is cursed, where every being is an omen, now becomes a tangible, terrifying possibility, a direct consequence of the player's choices and the machinations of Seluvis. The Dung Eater's curse, once confined to the shadows of the shunning grounds, now threatens to engulf the entire world, a testament to the enduring power of hatred and the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition. And so, as the grotesque legacy of the Dung Eater's curse continued to fester, casting a pall over the very essence of life in the lands between, the stage was set for a dramatic and perhaps final intervention. It is in the present day, the era of the Tarnished, that our narrative truly converges. Years, perhaps even centuries, after the shattering and the subsequent abandonment by the greater will, a new hope, or perhaps a new horror, stirs. The Tarnished, those once exiled warriors, stripped of their grace and cast out from the lands between, are called back. It is a resurrection, a defiant reawakening from the slumber of death, guided by the flickering light of grace, a divine blessing that now, mysteriously, illuminates their path once more, drawing them irresistibly towards the colossal, golden glow of the Erd Tree. Their return is not a gentle homecoming, The journey begins abruptly, violently, within the confines of the Chapel of Anticipation, a desolate, crumbling structure that serves as a grim antechamber to the madness that awaits. Here, the Tarnished is immediately thrust into confrontation with the grafted Scion, a truly horrifying creature, a patchwork abomination of limbs and flesh, a grotesque omen of the unspeakable horrors that have taken root in the lands between. This initial encounter is, for many, a swift and brutal defeat, a stark introduction to the unrelenting cruelty of this blighted land. Yet even in defeat, there is a twisted form of salvation. Upon falling to the Scion, the Tarnished is not truly vanquished, but rather transported, as if by some unseen ethereal force, to the stranded graveyard. This desolate, cavernous space serves as the true starting point of their arduous quest. It is here, amidst the decaying remains of past adventurers, that the spectral guidance of the first sight of grace manifests. These sights of grace, luminous beacons of golden light, are not merely checkpoints. They are the very manifestations of the Erd Tree's blessing, offering respite, guidance, and the ability to channel the power of runes. It is here, too, that the Tarnished receives their daunting, world-altering task to defeat the Shard-Bearers. These are the demigods, the direct descendants of Queen Marika, who in the aftermath of the Shattering have claimed fragments, or great runes, of the shattered Elden Ring. Their ambition, their madness, and their immense power stand as insurmountable obstacles. The ultimate goal, to mend the Elden Ring itself, to restore order to a fractured reality, and in doing so, to ascend to the mantle of Elden Lord. The path forward is fraught with peril and mystery. Early in their journey, the Tarnished encounters Melina, a spectral maiden of enigmatic origins. She is a figure cloaked in shadows and sorrow, a maiden without a purpose, her eyes bearing the weight of an ancient curse. Melina offers a pact. She will serve as the Tarnished's finger maiden, guiding them and channeling the power of runes, in exchange for being led to the foot of the Erd Tree, a place she is inexplicably unable to reach on her own. This alliance, born of mutual necessity, forms a central pillar of the Tarnished's adventure, as Melina's cryptic pronouncements and unwavering resolve provide both guidance and a deep sense of underlying tragedy. As the Tarnished ventures forth, traversing the vast and treacherous landscapes of Limgrave, Lernia, Caelid, and beyond, they begin to uncover the deep-seated corruption and pervasive horrors that lie beneath the surface of the lands between. Every crumbling ruin, every monstrous foe, every desperate survivor bears witness to the devastating effects of the shattering and the madness it wrought. The very fabric of reality seems to have frayed, and the land itself groans under the weight of ancient curses and lingering despair. The Tarnished witnesses the transformation of once noble knights into grotesque abominations, the descent of scholars into frenzied madness, and the pervasive suffering of the common folk, caught in the crossfire of demigod ambitions. Through their encounters with various NPCs, through deciphering ancient texts, and through the very landscapes they traverse, the Tarnished gradually pieces together the tragic tale of Queen Marika. They learn of her pivotal and ultimately destructive role in shattering the Elden Ring, an act of defiance or despair whose true motivations remain shrouded in mystery. This cataclysmic event, the Shattering, led directly to the subsequent abandonment of the lands between by the Greater Will, the enigmatic outer god that once governed this realm. This divine withdrawal left the land in a state of perpetual decay, its once golden grace now a fading memory, replaced by a pervasive sense of entropy and existential dread. The first major hurdle, the first shard-bearer to be confronted, is Godric the Grafted. His domain, Stormvale Castle, looms majestically yet menacingly over Limgrave. Godric is a pathetic yet terrifying figure, a direct descendant of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, but utterly devoid of his ancestors' nobility or strength. He is a grotesque testament to the lengths to which demigods have gone to cling to power, literally grafting the limbs of countless defeated warriors onto his own body, a desperate and horrifying attempt to reclaim a semblance of strength and authority. The Tarnished's confrontation with Godric is a brutal initiation into the true nature of the demigod's depravity and the sheer, unadulterated horror of their ambition. Navigating the treacherous Stormvale Castle itself is a harrowing experience. Every corridor, every battlements, every hidden chamber is teeming with grafted abominations, twisted soldiers, and the lingering despair of its inhabitants. The castle, once a symbol of power and grandeur, is now a monument to Godric's madness, a labyrinth of flesh and fear. The Tarnished witnesses firsthand the human cost of the shattering, the transformation of once loyal soldiers into mindless automatons, and the utter degradation of a once proud lineage. As the Tarnished delves deeper into the lore and history of the lands between, they begin to discover the uncomfortable truth of the Golden Order's hypocrisy. This once dominant religious and political institution, founded by Marika, preached a doctrine of absolute order and divine grace. However, beneath its gilded facade, the Golden Order inflicted immense suffering upon those deemed unworthy or heretical. The persecution of the Omens, the marginalization of the Crucible Knights, and the suppression of ancient pre-Erdtree faiths all paint a picture of a regime built on exclusion and cruelty. The Tarnished encounters the lingering echoes of this oppression, from the tortured spirits of those who defied the Golden Order to the physical scars etched into the landscape itself. Through their interactions with a diverse cast of characters, from the enigmatic Rani the Witch to the ambitious Mog, Lord of Blood, the Tarnished begins to understand the complex and often conflicting motivations of various factions and individuals. Rani's desire to cast off the greater will and usher in an age of stars, a new cosmic order free from the influence of the outer gods, presents a compelling alternative to the broken Golden Order. Her quest for self-determination and her willingness to defy divine decree offer a stark contrast to the stagnant traditions of the Erdtree. Conversely, Mog, a demigod obsessed with his own twisted vision of an alternate dynasty, seeks to establish a new order founded on the bloody worship of the Formless Mother, an outer god of primordial blood. His ambition, though horrific, is a powerful force, drawing in those who feel abandoned by the traditional gods. The Tarnished also encounters the zealous followers of the Frenzied Flame, who seek to reduce all of creation to a single, undifferentiated chaos, believing it to be the ultimate liberation from suffering. Each faction, each individual, offers a different interpretation of the Lands Between's plight and a different vision for its future, forcing the Tarnished to confront profound philosophical questions about the nature of order, chaos, and free will. As their journey progresses, the Tarnished faces increasingly powerful and distorted foes. These are not merely obstacles, they are living, breathing manifestations of the Lands Between's broken state and the lingering influence of the outer gods. From the cosmic horrors of Astal, natural born of the void, to the maddening whispers of the Frenzied Flame's adherents, each encounter forces the Tarnished to confront a different aspect of the world's decay. The monstrous creatures born of the scarlet rot in Caelid, the grotesque experiments of the Raya Lucarian Academy, and the ancient dragons that guard forgotten secrets all serve as a stark reminder of the pervasive corruption that has seeped into every corner of this once glorious land. These foes are not simply enemies to be defeated, they are reflections of the world's suffering, testaments to the devastating consequences of divine abandonment and unchecked ambition. Ultimately, the burden of choice falls squarely upon the Tarnished's shoulders. Their journey is not merely about accumulating power or defeating enemies, it is about shaping the very destiny of the lands between. The choices they make, the alliances they forge, and the paths they ultimately choose to follow will determine the ultimate fate of this blighted land and the nature of the new age that will dawn. Will they choose to mend the Elden Ring, restoring a semblance of the old order, albeit one forever scarred by the shattering? Will they usher in an age of stars, embracing Rani's vision of a cosmic order free from the greater will's influence? Will they succumb to the seductive nihilism of the frenzied flame, reducing all to primal chaos in a desperate bid to end all suffering? Or will they pursue other, more esoteric paths, perhaps even forging a new, unforeseen destiny for the lands between? The weight of these decisions, each with its own profound implications, rests heavily on the Tarnished, making their journey not just a quest for power, but a profound exploration of destiny, free will, and the very essence of existence in a world abandoned by its gods. The echoes of their choices will reverberate through the ages, shaping the very fabric of reality for millennia to come. Following the arduous trials and the defeat of Malekith, the Black Blade, the path to the Erd Tree finally lay open, culminating in the ultimate confrontation that defines the future, the dawn of a new age. The Tarnished, having overcome countless adversaries and pieced together the fragments of a shattered world, faced the Elden Beast, the very manifestation of the greater will's power. This cosmic entity, a shimmering serpentine horror born from the Elden Ring itself, represented the pinnacle of the outer god's influence in the lands between. Its defeat was not merely a victory over a powerful foe, but a symbolic severing of the greater will's direct physical presence, a profound act that shook the very foundations of the established cosmic order. The Elden Beast, with its ethereal form and devastating holy attacks, embodied the absolute authority that had governed the lands between for millennia. Its demise signaled the end of an era, a final cataclysmic crescendo before the quiet, profound choice that awaited the Tarnished. With the Elden Beast vanquished, the colossal doors of the Erd Tree, once impenetrable, now stood ajar, revealing the gilded heart of the lands between. The Tarnished entered not into a realm of divine splendor as one might expect, but into a chamber of profound sorrow and cosmic significance. Here, amidst the golden light and ancient roots, lay Marika's fractured form. Queen Marika the Eternal, the vessel of the Elden Ring and the progenitor of the Golden Order, was not a living being in the traditional sense, but a shattered idol, her body twisted and broken, reflecting the state of the very cosmic power she contained. She was a tragic figure, a goddess who had defied her own creators, her imprisonment a testament to the greater will's unforgiving nature. The Elden Ring, the fundamental concept of order and causality in this world, resided within her, its power now accessible, albeit in a fragmented state. The Tarnished stood before her, not as a conqueror, but as a potential restorer, a figure poised to mend the very fabric of existence. It was at this crucial juncture that the Tarnished faced the most pivotal choice of their journey: how to mend the Elden Ring. This was not a simple act of repair, but a fundamental redefinition of the cosmic laws governing the lands between. The Elden Ring, as we've discussed, is not a physical object in the traditional sense, but a conceptual framework, a set of divine decrees that dictate reality. Mending it meant imprinting a new set of rules, a new philosophy, onto the very essence of the world. This decision, influenced by the various factions and philosophies encountered throughout the journey, would determine the fate of all life, all history, and all future in the lands between. Each potential mending represented a distinct ideological path, a different vision for the future, each with its own profound implications for the nature of suffering, salvation, and the ongoing cosmic struggle. The Tarnished, having ascended to the pinnacle of power, was now tasked with an act of creation, or perhaps recreation, on a scale previously unimaginable. Upon making this profound choice, the Tarnished became Elden Lord, not merely a title of power, but a designation of ultimate authority and responsibility. The act of becoming Elden Lord was intrinsically linked to the mending of the Elden Ring, as the new Lord would embody the principles of the newly established cosmic order. The various ways in which the Elden Ring could be mended led to distinct outcomes, each shaping the nascent age that would follow. These outcomes represented the culmination of the Tarnished's journey and the myriad influences they had encountered. One such outcome, and perhaps the most straightforward interpretation of simply mending the Elden Ring without specific ideological intervention, leads to the Age of Fracture. In this scenario, the lands between remain broken, a reflection of the shattered Elden Ring. While the greater will's direct influence might be diminished, the underlying issues of conflict, decay, and the cyclical nature of power struggles persist. The world is not truly healed, but rather patched together, its wounds still visible and its future uncertain. The Golden Order, in some form, might be reestablished, but without the transformative power of a truly unified vision, it would likely be a brittle and imperfect restoration. The horrors of the past, the lingering resentments, and the inherent instability of a world governed by a fractured cosmic law would continue to plague its inhabitants. This ending suggests a continuation of the struggle, a world where the cycle of suffering is not broken, but merely reset, awaiting the next cataclysm. The very concept of fracture implies a lack of true cohesion,